Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video. We're doing GWV Sunday Round-Up for today's second video. So as always on a Sunday, I've got your eclectic mix of this and that. We're looking at things like sea surface temperature anomalies, what's happening with solar activity. We'll see what's going on with ENSO over the past week. And also have got the QBO and of course weather for the next week to 10 days as well. So I hope you find it interesting and informative. We'll begin with Tropical Storm Barry. So I'll bring you up to date with the latest developments on that very shortly. Just to say that the first video up today was the 6th update for autumn, 6th autumn analogs update. We're on at June CT data for that one. The video is on the homepage at GWV.com at the moment. It will be placed on the autumn updates and forecast page with a written summary going over everything that we discuss in the video this evening. You usually get up around 7-8 o'clock in the evening, so you'll be able to come back and watch the video on demand and have a read of that later on today. No autumn analogs next week. They'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. Right, so let's get on with the autumn. Let's go doing the GWV Sunday Round. Let's get on with the GWV Sunday Round-Up, and we're going to start off and say with Barry. So this is the current position of Tropical Storm Barry just here. It's a very slow moving system, so it's come up out of the Gulf of Mexico. It's sitting over the state of Louisiana at the moment. So it's giving, is a Tropical Storm Barry. It's giving maximum sustained winds of 45 miles an hour and copious amounts of rain as well. This is how Tropical Storm Barry is forecast to progress over the next few days. It did go to hurricane status, by the way, just very brief, around an hour or so yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening. It went up to a Category 1 hurricane and then very quickly moved back down to a tropical storm. So it did just about, though, make hurricane status as a Category 1 hurricane. Anyway, that's the current position of Tropical Storm Barry just there. Within the next few hours, it will be going down to a tropical depression as it moves northwards from Louisiana into Arkansas through the course of tomorrow. It'll carry on further northwards and become post-tropical by the time we get through to Tuesday. Then that area of low pressure, it will just go down to an area of low pressure as it carries on further north, moving into these northern states. It may well do something like that and head out into the North Atlantic through the middle part of next week, just as an area of low pressure. So very significant storm, this, as I say, producing very copious amounts of rain over the state of Louisiana at the moment, being really, really nasty. This is how things are looking in terms of Siberian snow cover and Eurasian snow cover, I suppose I should say, and Arctic sea ice. So we're snow-free now across Eurasia, except over the sort of mountainous areas where we would still have a little bit of snow cover. But basically, across the Siberian plain, we are now snow-free and will remain so until kind of like end of August, early September, and then the first few white patches will start appearing again. Arctic sea ice, of course, is on its way downwards. We're in the melt season at the moment. That's the yellow area just there is kind of like Arctic sea ice. So you can see how it's melting around the edges. That will continue into September as well. This is how we're looking in terms of Arctic sea ice extent at the moment. This is from National Snow and Ice Data Centre. So the grey line is the trend. Of course, we're well under trend, have been for several years, well under the 30-year trend. That is the current position in terms of Arctic sea ice extent, that sort of lavender coloured line just there. How does that compare to 2012? Let's put that in the death spiral year. So at the moment we're on a par with 2012 really, so that's where we are. They're very much aligned with one another. Let's see how that compares to 2018. So we're actually quite a bit under 2018 now at the moment in terms of Arctic sea ice extent. Very close to 2017, that yellow line just there. Very close to 2016 as well. That's 2015, so we're under 2015, the red line just there. Very close to 2014 and very close, or maybe a little bit under 2013. So we're not seeing anything overly dramatic at the moment. We're on a par with where we have been over the past few years at this point. Well down below trend, of course. Again, the grey line is the trend line. But at the moment, there's nothing to suggest that we're going to have a death spiral, because what happened with all of those other years is that while they were all kind of like on a par with 2012, the death spiral year for Arctic sea ice at this point, you'll notice how they pull up from, or they tend to pull up from 2012 as we get through towards the sort of peak of the melt season, which is always kind of like the first week or so of September. And the green dash line, of course, that is the death spiral year of 2012. So, I mean, we may have another death spiral, but in terms of Arctic sea ice, but it's too early to say that that's definitely what will happen. More likely what will happen is that, again, similar to previous recent years, we will kind of like pull away from 2012 as we get through towards the peak of the melt season later in August and through to early September. But obviously we shall be keeping a very close eye on that over the next few weeks and the next few months. This is how the solar disk is looking on our side of the disk today from solarham.net. So we are spotless again, no sunspots at all. Therefore, solar activity is at very low levels, and Solarham is reporting that it's expected that solar activity will remain at very low levels over the next 3 days. This is the GWV Sunday Round-Up Solar Activity Tracker, updated to today, 14th of July, by our good friend James Atquill. The orange line is depicting each individual day's sunspots. And we can see that, again, we are having a long stretch without any sunspots, really. So we got a few sunspots just there appearing, and then again just there. But really, since around kind of like the middle of May, which is just here to where we are right now, we haven't seen very many sunspots at all. And this means that our trend lines, which are the thick green and the thick red lines, they're kind of like on the floor of the chart. So, I mean, we're just at a really, really low level of solar activity. We did possibly get our first sunspot, or one of the first sunspots for solar cycle 25, not all that long ago, around a week or so ago. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're at solar minimum yet, because there's always an overlap between the two solar cycles. So you will tend to get sunspots for the new solar cycle before the old solar cycle has ended. You see what I mean? It is quite difficult to ascertain when you do reach true solar minimum and begin the next solar cycle. But we shall know when it happens, because NASA and all of the other agencies will make a big thing about it within the media and let us know that we've started the new solar cycle. I don't think we've started solar cycle number 25 yet, even though we did have a sunspot for solar cycle 25 around a week ago. Anyway, we're at a very low level. We're at solar minimum. We're at very low level of solar activity and will remain so over the next few months. So I suspect we'll reach true solar minimum and begin solar cycle 25 probably in around 6 to 9 months' time. That's when I would anticipate it'll happen. So probably over the winter or into the start of next year is when I would suspect this will happen. But we shall see, and we'll be keeping an eye on the solar tracker, of course. This was sent through to us by a good friend Richard Short as well. I thought I'd just show you this. It's showing how many spotless days that we've had this year compared to past years. Of course, we're at solar minimum, so you expect a high number of days without any sunspots at the moment. We've had 124 days during 2019. That's 64% of the year without any sunspots. That compares to 2018, which had in total 221 days without any sunspots, 61% of the year. And you can see how you go further back, you find that you don't get any days that haven't got any sunspots. You see what I mean? So in 2015, we had 0 days that were spotless. So every day in 2015 had sunspots, and 2014, only 1 day in 2014 was a spotless day. And then we go back into the beginning of the solar cycle, and we've got 2010, 2009, 2008 there, and you see the number of spotless days increasing once again. So you've got solar minimum just there, you've got solar maximum around here, and then we're back into solar minimum again just there. Always really fascinating to see how the data stacks up and how we see this consistent theme through the solar cycles, that you go from minimum to maximum and back to minimum again. And obviously we are at solar minimum right now with 64% of the year so far not having any sunspots whatsoever. Big thank you to Richard for sending that one through, and a big thank you to James for sending the solar tracker through as well. We shall be keeping an eye on all of this over the next few weeks. So we're going to do Solar Sunday for the final time this year on August the 4th, I think. That's around 3 weeks' time. Right, sea surface temperature anomalies. Next is how things were looking in the oceans last week. So we've got the equatorial Pacific Ocean just here. We've got the northern Pacific Ocean just there. We've got the North Atlantic over here. That's how things were looking with sea surface temperature anomalies last week. This is the very latest. So dealing with the ENSO region first of all, very little change there. We are still sort of on this border between El Nino and sort of ENSO neutral, but on the warm side. You'll notice there is this little area of blue now starting to appear. So that's colder than average sea surface temperature anomalies, just beginning to strengthen a little bit from last week to this week. I think we can say that has strengthened a little bit. It's a very small area at the moment, but you'll notice all of these cold and average sea surface temperature anomalies are gathering here from the coast of Chile and going out into the southern Pacific Ocean. So sometimes when that happens, it can be a precursor to a cold event, to a La Nina, and this little area of blue just here possibly is the beginnings of switching from El Nino to La Nina, but it's too early to be definitive about that. But certainly it does appear that colder than average area of sea surface temperature anomalies is strengthened a little bit over the past week. However, generally the equatorial Pacific Ocean is still kind of like on a borderline between ENSO neutral on the warm side and really weak El Nino. Further north in the northern Pacific Ocean, let's have a look at how things were last week and then go forwards to this week. Very little change. It remains much warmer than average in this northeastern part of the northern Pacific Ocean. Very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies up there. In the Atlantic Ocean, it remains pretty warm to the south of Greenland, and then we've got this cooler area here around Newfoundland, albeit it is shrinking a little bit, and then it goes relatively warm again as we get through to the tropics. So we do still have a tripole signal actually in the North Atlantic, that warm over cold over warm sort of three-way band, although we begin to lose that tripole signal a little bit now, which you would expect. It can't stay. You can't, very rarely will you keep a consistent tripole going for month after month. The idea with that, remember we have the tripole signal developing through May, reaching its peak in June. The idea behind that is that we should see that recurring or returning as we get through into the winter, but we won't keep it consistently, so we can expect it to fade over the next few months until we get up to winter, when it should, if the theory works correctly, it should come back. In the Norwegian Sea, so in the far north of the Norwegian Sea, quite warm, but down in towards kind of like Norway and to the north of Scotland, actually a bit colder on average with sea surface temperature anomalies there. Mediterranean looking very warm. That's in response to, of course, the hot summer weather that is currently going on. Not particularly warm through the Bay of Biscay, despite that tremendous heat wave that they had in France at the end of June. So Bay of Biscay actually looking quite close to average with sea surface temperature anomalies there. All in all, very, very stable with the oceans at the moment. Not a huge amount of change over the weeks. This is how the SOI is looking. This is the Southern Oscillation Index Remember, it's just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state in the southern Pacific Ocean. It's measuring the air pressure between Darwin in Australia and Tahiti in the middle of the South Pacific. So when the SOI is in its negative phase, then the atmospheric setup is going to be reflective of El Nino. When the SOI is in its positive phase, the atmospheric setup in the Southern Ocean will be reflective of La Nina. This is from Queensland government. So actually, we're going through a very, very negative phase of the SOI at the moment, really strongly reflective of El Nino. So the ocean is kind of like a little bit at odds with the atmosphere at the moment, because we have got that slight cooling of the equatorial Pacific Ocean that's currently taking place. We talked about that a moment ago. Although the equatorial Pacific Ocean is still really weak El Nino type threshold. But the atmosphere is very strongly reflective of El Nino at the moment. So, example, for the 7th of July, these are all provisional, but they don't tend to change greatly. 7th of July, we have the SY coming out at minus 14.77. 8th of July, we have the SY coming out at minus 21.07. Going a bit further up, we find that the 11th of July comes out at minus 19.33. All of these numbers are telling us that the atmosphere on these days was very reflective of quite a strong El Nino type setup in the Southern Ocean. Got the 12th of July coming out at minus 20.19, 13th of July at minus 19.82, and the very latest, 14th of July, because they're ahead of us, of course, in Australia, so 14th of July has already occurred. So we see that it goes down to minus 26.22. Again, very negative with the SOI. So at the moment, the atmosphere is actually a little bit at odds with the ocean. The ocean, the equatorial Pacific Ocean, looks like it wants to start shifting away from El Nino. Not necessarily going to La Nina yet, but it wants to start shifting away from El Nino. But the atmosphere, the atmospheric setup is still very strongly reflective of El Nino at the moment. So bit of a battle going on between the ocean and the atmosphere. It'll be interesting to see how that resolves itself over the next few weeks. CFS-V2 continues to forecast a chance, anyway, that we're going to go into La Nina now. So we talked about this in last week's GWV Sunday Round-Up. A real flip has taken place with the CFS-V2 over the past few weeks. Around a month ago, the CFS was forecast that weak El Nino would continue through to the end of the year. But now you'll notice it is going kind of like, certainly going to ENSO neutral, almost getting towards La Nina. The temperature anomalies are on the side. They're the all-important minus 0.5 degrees, half a degree below average, and this is the all-important half a degree above average. To get either an El Nino or a La Nina designated, or to be at that kind of threshold officially, but you need to either be half a degree below average or half a degree above average, whether it's La Nina or El Nino, and over 5 tri-month periods. So that number, that's 0.5, whether it's above or below average, that number, 0.5, is always very, very critical. Where we are right now is around ENSO neutral just there. Still on the warm side just about, though. But you'll see from the black dash line that by the time you get through to September, it wants us to be very much on that all-important minus 0.5 temperature anomaly line just there. So by September, it's kind of like got us to just about, anyway, to La Nina, to a cold event. I mean, it keeps us around that sort of threshold through to the end of the year. So it's just about going for a week La Nina now, CFS-V2. The more recent ensemble members, by the way, are these blue-coloured lines just here. They're actually going a little bit lower, quite a few of those. They're going into almost moderate La Nina type threshold. So quite what's going on here, I'm not sure, but I suspect it is reflecting gathering colder than average subsurface temperature anomalies. So underneath the surface of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, despite the fact that on the surface it's still relatively warm, under the surface I think colder than average temperature anomalies are gathering. And also, of course, we've got all of these colder than average sea surface temperature anomalies to the south of the actual Pacific Ocean just here, and I think the CFS is picking up on that and wants to develop it into a weak landing, just about a weak landing anyway, by the time you get through to the beginning of the autumn. We shall see how that works out, but it looks like it has us more or less at a weak landing as we go into winter of 2019-2020. So we shall see what's going to happen there over the next few weeks. It will resolve itself, and this battle between the ocean and the atmosphere will resolve itself over the next few weeks, I'm sure about that. QBO next, quasi-biennial oscillation. So, again, it's just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state. This time, it's looking at the strength of the zone of westerlies. When you're in the westerly phase of the QBO, then you are strengthening the zone of westerlies. Basically, when you are in the easterly phase of the QBO, you are weakening the zone of westerlies. This is something that's more important for winter forecasting, has less of an impact at other times of the year. We're in the westerly phase of the QBO now. You can see all of the phases. This is from the University of Berlin. You can see all of the phases of the QBO here through the white and darker areas. So, for example, that just there is a westerly phase of the QBO from 1990 through to 1991, and then this white area is an easterly phase of the QBO from 1991 through to 1992. And so on we go through the years and through the decades. The QBO should be very regular. It should be almost like a pulse or a heartbeat, although it did go a bit wrong around 2015, 2016, where we had a failure of the easterly QBO. You can see it just there, that white area just there. That's a failure of the easterly QBO when the transition from west to east took place. But other than that, as far as we know, the QBO is very, very regular. So where we are right now is just here in this darker area. So again, we're in the westerly phase of the QBO, but we are already seeing signs of the easterly QBO beginning at the top of the atmosphere just here. In the stratosphere, really, stratospheric level, really. So if you think that you've kind of like got the top of the atmosphere just here, that's 10 HPA, that's up in the stratosphere, and then you've kind of like got the surface down there where we are at 100 HPA. So these phases, westerly and easterly phase of the QBO, begin at the top of the atmosphere and move their way down into the troposphere. Troposphere is kind of like at the 30 to 50 HPA level just there. So you can see that we've got the edge of the westerly QBO just there appearing, and of course the easterly QBO is starting to appear at the very, very top of the atmosphere now. So what will happen over the next few months is that this grey and white area will kind of like descend a bit like that, and by the time we get through to early 2020, we should be in the easterly phase of QBO if everything works out. Of course, I did say that we had that situation in 2015-16 where the easterly QBO failed. As far as we know, that's the only time that's ever happened, so you wouldn't expect that to happen again. But we are definitely seeing signs of the beginning of the easterly QBO at the top of the atmosphere and the stratosphere at the moment, and it will descend. I would have thought it will descend through the remainder of the year and reach a troposphere probably by the time we get through to the winter. So this winter is likely to be a west to east transitioning QBO winter. Of course, it might happen a little bit before the winter. Actually, we might reach the easterly QBO just little bit before the winter, but I would anticipate this winter will transition from west to east in the troposphere. But we shall see. We'll keep a close eye on it, and it does sort of tell us that we are likely to see the zone of westerlies sort of decreasing a little bit as we get through into winter, but we shall see. There have been many mild winters associated with easterly QBO phases, so it's not as simple as say you're in an easterly QBO and you're going to have a cold winter. Nothing is ever simple for the UK, particularly when it comes to getting a cold winter. But we'll keep an eye on the QBO over the next few months. Arctic oscillation observed and forecast looking like this. The black line shows where we've been with the Arctic oscillation. Red lines at the end where GFS ensembles are forecasting Arctic oscillation to go. Remember, again, it's just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state, as with all of these other indexes and oscillations. They're just sort of telling you what the atmospheric state is doing. So when the Arctic oscillation is negative, you're going to have high pressure blocking over North Pole. When the Arctic oscillation is positive, you're going to have low pressure over the North Pole. Been a prolonged negative phase of the Arctic oscillation going all the way back to the beginning of May. That's where we are right now, still negative with the Arctic oscillation. So we still have appreciable levels of high pressure up over the North Pole. For the next week or so, we're forecasting, or the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to stay in its negative phase, but it does look as though we might be seeing signs in the second half of July, more like the final week or so of July actually. It does look as though we might be seeing signs that it's going to start shifting a little bit more positive. So it could be that the Arctic oscillation is on the move, beginning to shift out of this very negative phase that it's been in since the beginning of May. Could be that August will see the Arctic oscillation going back into its positive phase. If that happens, we will see low pressure developing over the North Pole and around Green. We will probably see the beginning actually of the polar vortex starting to develop over the top of the North Pole. So keep an eye on that. It does look as though the Arctic oscillation could be starting to shift a little bit as we get through towards the end of July, possibly into the beginning of August. This is how the North Atlantic oscillation is looking. Again, same idea. Black line shows where we've been with the NAO. Red line's at the end, where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the NAO to go. We've been in a negative phase, very negative phase of the NAO since May. Actually back into the end of April, but the whole of May was negative with the North Atlantic oscillation, as was the whole of June. We're still negative right now with the NAO. GFS ensembles over the next week forecasting us to stay negative. In the extended range with the GFS ensembles, taking us towards the end of July, we have got a bit of a split. So we've got more ensemble members now than we've seen for quite a long time going positive. Some of them are staying negative. Again, it looks like the NAO might be starting to move for the end of July and possibly going into August. We may be seeing this prolonged sort of negative phase of the AO and NAO that we have been in since early May. We might be starting to see signs of that coming to an end for the end of July, and particularly as we go into August. That would tell us that there could be quite a fundamental shift in the global circulation pattern beginning to take place as we get towards the end of July and into August. Both these indexes going positive, if they do, would imply that we're likely to be seeing low pressure developing around Greenland and the Arctic area, and possibly a strengthening of the Azores High. If we get a strengthening of the Azores High, two things could happen. We might go into just a pretty westerly sort of situation, which in August isn't going to be particularly inspiring. We would probably have relatively cool west-northwesterly winds and showery rain for the north. But if the Azores High strengthens enough, it might start to build in big ridges into the west of Europe. If that was to happen, then August could turn quite a lot drier and also could turn quite a lot hotter as well. So it'll be interesting to see if, big if, the AO and NAO are going into their positive phases. Be interesting to see what the effect of that is on the Azores High. Right, so let's have a look at the weather for the next few days then, and the GFS is looking like this for Wednesday. So we're under a slight ridge of high pressure on Wednesday actually, although low pressure is heading in from off the Atlantic. That takes into a more unsettled second half to the week, with low pressure coming in from the Atlantic, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. Next weekend, looks like we're going to see high pressure beginning to build both to the south and to the east of us as low pressure stalls a little bit in the Atlantic. So we do start to draw up some really quite warm air, actually, with the latest GFS run, or the midnight GFS run, I suppose I should say. By Monday, the 22nd of July, we are drawing up quite warm, maybe you will say fairly hot southerly to southeast winds. But we've got this low pressure just out to our west, so it all looks rather unstable, all rather volatile. As we get up towards day 10, that low pressure is beginning to move in from the west, bringing showers or longer spells of rain, maybe thunder, particularly to northern western parts of the country, although still quite close to this ridge of high pressure down to our southwest. In the more extended range with this GFS run, it does actually turn cool and unsettled. That's how we finish up. As far as we can go is Tuesday the 30th of July. So high pressure continues to be reaching to our south, low pressure is out to the north and the west. This is the GEM. The Canadian model looks like that. Again, starting to turn more unsettled into the second half of this week, particularly for northern parts of the country. I think we'll all get some rain by Friday. They are in desperate need of some rain down in the far south and southwest of the country. It's been really dry there over the past few weeks. So I think even in the south there'll be some useful rain at the end of this week. That lasts into the weekend, but then we start to see a strengthening of the high pressure again as we get through to Monday the 22nd of July. High pressure is beginning to develop around the UK and western parts of Europe. Low pressure is becoming stalled out in the Atlantic, and this actually makes more of that high pressure and turns it really quite hot by day 10. This is Wednesday, 24th of July. Again, we've got this ridge of high pressure sitting to our east and going up to Scandinavia. Low pressure's out to the northwest. And the squeeze of the isobars tells us that the wind is pushing up from the south. So the upper air temperatures have turned hot here with the GEM by day 10. That will certainly get us back to 30 degrees there, 86 Fahrenheit. On day 10, Wednesday, 24th of July. Again, it all looks rather unstable. We have got this low pressure out to our west, so quite quick you would expect that to move in and cut off that hot southerly feed of air, possibly bring thunderstorms with it as well. Classic sort of Spanish balloon type chart, that one. ECM is looking like this, so again rather showery and unsettled as we go towards the end of this week, and that takes us into next weekend as well, before we begin to get heights rising to our south and southeast as we head up towards day 10. Got quite a deep area of low pressure in the Atlantic there on Monday 22nd of July. I think that could contain the humid remains of what is currently Tropical Storm Barry, so the remains of Barry might be contained within that area of low pressure. Again, we start to see this hotter air being drawn up from the south with the ECM, but again it does look quite unstable. So clearly the upper air temperatures are turning a lot hotter as we're moving towards day 10, and that's how we look as we get to day 10, which is Wednesday the 24th of July. So quite a deep area of low pressure out to the northwest of Scotland. There'd be some sort of cold front sweeping in across the country, bring cooler air from off the Atlantic, but ahead of it actually quite hot with those upper air temperatures. So very briefly, around sort of 23rd, 24th, maybe 25th of July, we might get a push of hot air from the south, but if we do, it looks like it'll be quite temporary and we'll go back into a cooler, fresher westerly flow. There's no sign of the Azores high locking in yet to produce a prolonged spell of hot weather. No sign of that this side of August, I don't think. But once we get into August, it's possible that's where things will head. But we shall have to wait and see about that. It's a very long way off, of course. CFSV2 is looking like this. It's a 500 millibar height spread down 2 week periods. The first week period will take us from the 14th to the 20th of July. The coming week will have above average heights sitting up to our northeast with below average heights in the Atlantic. So perhaps drawing up some quite warm air at times from the south, but also turning a little bit showery in the north and west in particular. Then we get this big ridge developing in week 2. Not really seeing signs of this within the shorter range model output, I have to say, but this is what CFS is showing for the 21st to 27th of July, with this big area of high pressure sitting over to the east of the country. Obviously, that sends a jet stream a long way north and would draw up hot air from the south or from the southeast. Now, within this period, we know that there is the chance of a day or so of quite hot weather around the 24th of July. But this is a week, an anomaly for a week. And if that came off, it would be a week of pretty hot and dry weather. Then we go through to week 3, which is the 28th of July to the 3rd of August, and the high pressure then begins to pull out to our west. So it's still a lot of dry weather, but it's starting to turn cooler as the air begins to move back in from the northwest once again. And then week 4, which is the 4th to the 10th of August, actually goes quite unsettled, with a trough of low pressure setting up across the across the northwest of Europe. They've got a ridge in the Atlantic, hints of a mid-Atlantic ridge there, actually, so you would do something a bit like that with the flow, with the jet stream. That would be much cooler and much more unsettled if it came off. The Surface is showing that quite a lot, actually, at the moment, for that early part of August to turn cooler and more unsettled, with that trough of low pressure setting up across the northwest of Europe. However, for August as a whole, this is how it's currently being forecast in terms of its 700 millibar height anomaly from the CFS. And it's actually going for quite an anticyclonic August, with above average heights centred over top of the UK and below average heights up towards the northwest. That would be a positive sort of AO-NAO type pattern. With low pressure up to the northwest around Greenland and Iceland, a strengthening, a ridge of the Azores High into the west of Europe and going over here into some central parts of Europe as well. So you'd see the AO and the NAO going back into their positive phases, with that doing so because of the high pressure building around the northwest of Europe and the low pressure developing up across Greenland and Iceland. That will give us a pretty warm and dry August. Temperature anomalies for August are being forecast to be significantly above average, not just for the UK, but for many central parts of Europe. So quite a hot month being forecast there by CFS for August. Precipitation-wise, there's always really weak signals for precipitation with these charts. So you would expect, though, with high pressure centred over the country, despite the fact that the model is going for average precipitation, doesn't really have a signal, you would expect, however, a drier than average month would be likely with that high pressure centred over top of the UK. And going even further out, finally, with the CFS, this is what it is currently forecasting. This is just for fun. This is what it's currently forecasting for the winter of 2019-2020. And you've guessed it, it's going westerly. It has below average heights sitting to the north of the UK, above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. So it's basically going for a ridge from the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic, low pressure around Iceland, and a westerly wind direction would be dominating with that kind of anomaly. Westerly winter, basically, is being forecast by the CFS at both winter of 2019-2020, which would, of course, be a milder but wetter than average winter. Don't worry about that. If you would like a cold winter, the CFS will change several times between now and the winter. But I thought I'd just end with that as a bit of fun and show you that at the moment CFS, as it often does, is forecasting a mild westerly but probably quite wet winter. Right, a bit of an extended Sunday Roundup today, getting on for 40 minutes. Hope you found it interesting and informative. Don't forget to check out the autumn analogues if you haven't yet done so. That video will be placed on the autumn updates page later on today with a summary going over everything that we discussed in the video. Get that up for you around 8 o'clock this evening. But at around 38 minutes, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.